Hello once again everyone, and welcome back to our Going Posta series. So joining me once again is Jake, my resident Italian. So today we're going to be continuing along. Last week we tackled Sinistra, and now we're going to be going back to something we've already kind of talked about, but it's going to change properties quite a bit, and that being Posta di Donna Sinistra. So what is Posta di Donna Sinistra? Well, it's essentially Posta di Donna held on the left side, but there are some interesting things that happen when you move the guard over to the left side. So to remind you, Posta di Donna can be a couple different positions depending upon which drawing you're going off of. Just like Vampag, etc., can be a couple different things, just at the shoulder. The one we've been working off of has been up here, Posta di Donna Destrasa, or also known as Posta di Donna Soprana, held up high. We're going to essentially take these same mechanics that we talked about, but now we're going to transition it to the other side. Now, first and foremost, the most immediate couple things that are going to happen is, number one, when you hold it on your left shoulder, you're going to be a little bit more powerful. This is a backhanded fendenti, right? Or we'll go ahead and use a little bit later terminology, reverso, right? Which means that it's going to have a little bit more power to it. The other thing that's very beneficial about that is that it's going to put us on a new line that isn't necessarily one that people don't exploit, but it's one people don't tend to exploit initially. So let's talk about that a little bit first. So, if Jake is fighting against me, go ahead and just hold Posta Longa, if you wouldn't mind. There we go. He has two lines. He has the inside line, which is closest to the camera, and he has his outside line, which is on the outside of his sword. Now, of course, when it comes to using two hands on the blade, you can compensate for this asymmetric power a lot easier than most. So we talked about this a little bit with the step out, right? And wanting to cross up your body. With this, it's not particularly hard for him to spring up his back foot, and now he can apply a lot more energy this way, or he can take that foot back, and he can apply a lot more energy this way. However, the biggest difference between the inside and outside line that's important is that, number one, fencer's first trick. You throw an action from your dominant side, which is strong, to provoke them to parry, and then you follow up with a simpler action on the other side, which strikes them. In fact, there was a recent survey which showed that really about 90% of the hits are concentrated here, here, and here, so on this sword arm side, which is not surprising if you are a right-hander majority fighting right-handed people. Now, that's one part of it. The other part of it in regards to this line is that you get access to the sword arm in a new way. So there are a couple different ways that you can take it, and we will show more as time goes on, but if you just hold your sword out, right? Right now it's at about a 45 from my perspective. If I meet it with a 45 from my perspective, we end up in the middle. If I meet it on the same line, we actually get relatively the same sort of pressure, but he's got a little bit more of it than I do, so not really great. He's going to want to be a little more over here, different topic, right? If I meet it from below with either long edge or short edge, I get kind of the back of his blade, and I get underneath his blade, which is very good for me. That gives me a lot of exploitable options, but today we're going to be meeting it on the same line. Now, this can be a couple different things. Normally we don't want to do this because you might get hit yourself. But because of the position we're going to be using it, and we're going to deal with incoming attack and focus on clearing it first, we're going to get some fun options that you don't normally see used initially. So, hold that out of the way. The things that Fiore says that Posta di Donna Sinistra are particularly good at is going to be cutting and covering. So we'll show that first. So the idea here is that I move up into Posta di Donna Sinistra. So I'm just basically in Posta di Donna on my left-hand side. I don't want to let my arms be too crossed up or anything along those lines. If Jake comes in with a cut, right, I can obviously just move my sword between us and cover myself pretty well, right? But the difference is, as opposed to our other covers, I'm going to get a lot more opening than I normally do because he's suddenly quite exposed. You can fill this with a bunch of different things depending upon how much hip turn you got. In this case, I got a lot of hip turn. There's a lot of him open to me. I can choose to either follow through with a nice finesse to thrust, I can follow through with a nice cut to his arm, I can follow through with a cut to his face. Kind of depends on what I want to do if I want to stay long. So, here's that again. And I went ahead and pulled it so I don't destroy his arms. But that's a relatively simple combo and not particularly difficult to do. You can even start adding in a little bit of the mezzani from it if you wish. Now, an important differentiation is when we talk about the 7 cuts, the mezzani from your left side is supposed to be done with the short edge. Here it doesn't necessarily matter. It will achieve the same thing, but if you wish to experiment with it, you can definitely use a falso parry here. He comes in, boom. It will create just a little bit more opening if you can get this flick timed right. If you don't, it's not going to get very much for you at all, and so the long edge might be a little bit safer. With a little bit of practice, that's a nice thing to have. And I'll show that slowly facing the camera so you can see it. From here, rather than going across, I'm going to open the arms and flick. Show that again. Open the arms, flick. Can be quite nice as both an attack and a parry. Usually you'll want to use it to deflect things, do it at your own risk. But that's the first option. Second option is going to be just cutting with it in general. Now, I didn't talk about this when we did Posta di Donna, but one of the things you can do is you can make all 7 cuts out of this opening. If you want to, you can throw a reverso fendenti, so a cut from your left side, from here very easily, by just bringing it up and around your head, which basically moves you through Posta di Donna Sinistra for a brief moment before you execute your cut. This is usually one that you'll use a bit more as a surprise. So for example, if I'm here and he's either trying to just control my blade or he's hanging out in posta longa, it's not particularly hard for me to cut around his blade. And it may look a little derpy when we're static, but I assure you it works. That's one thing that you can do out of it. You can do the same thing out of Sinistra. And this is one I actually prefer to do. So the reason I prefer to do it is from here, he's now ready. He can tell that I'm going to try and take this line. What will surprise him is when I bring it around my head and can now cut from my dominant side. What's also nice about this is, as you saw, I can reach a lot further than I can the other way because my hands are going to be uncrossed and I'm doing a fendenti, a mendrito, from my dominant side. The other nice benefit about this guy, besides being unexpected and long reaching, is that I also end up folding into dente den chingaro when I finish. Now it's not to say that you couldn't still, fold out of this, sorry, other way. You couldn't still fight from here when you finish. You basically end up in Porta di Ferro. I personally, however, am a big fan of fighting out of dente den chingaro. So something that puts me back there is just going to be a favorite of mine. But the other thing that Posta di Donna Sinistra is particularly known for is going to be that it can enter into the close range game very easily. And the way we're going to deal with this is we're also going to talk about how it breaks the point very easily. So we already know the play breaking at the point, right? He comes up with a thrust, which means that I need to be stepping out of the way offline, and I use my sword and put it on top of his. When he did it from the dominant side, I was stepping out that way. When it comes to doing it out of Sinistra, it's double nice because this is going to happen. He comes in. I'm going to end up a lot closer to him than I did before. It's much easier for me to get a bit more control. Now from here is where things get interesting. Normally, if I did breaking the point, I could follow up with a falso and then come back down with the fendenti. However, from this side, while I can still achieve that, it's not necessarily the best option. What I personally find is great from this is once I've got this control, go ahead and just go into the half sword and give him a nice thrust. You can easily guard yourself, or you can work around his guard if he tries to do anything. Another option you can do is you can actually move into the close range game. So, he comes in with that thrust, break the point. As you can see, I've gotten very close to him. All of Fiore's close range actions, not all of them, but generally, they gravitate toward wanting to get onto this line by coming up with the left foot, following the right foot, bringing you into the action. The reason for this is because once I have my left side here, I can reach onto his sword arm, which is very good because most people wrestle dominantly from their dominant arm, and furthermore, he's going to want to fight with his sword. So if I were to close in with him on the other side, he'd take his left hand off to meet my grapple and can still use his force multiplier. If I end up on this side though, his only option is to either release with that hand, which is kind of hard to do if I'm putting all my weight on it, and then he has to wield the sword in his offhand, or he releases with his non-dominant hand, which is very far away from me, and I have a better option. So in general, you're closing in on the side where his weapon is, which works a lot for you. Now what could you do from here? Well, frankly, you can do kind of whatever. There's a ton of plays from his close range that will all work fantastically here. Just kind of depends upon what you want to look to do. But as far as a guard that's going to bring you there and really set it up quite easily, it's fantastic. Just to show you comparison, normally to get into the close range game, this is what I have to do. I want to cut initially, so I'm going to cut from my dominant side with a passere, get him to, well, go ahead and cover for now, right? I'm going to cut with a passere, he's going to cover, which brings my right foot forward so I'm nice and close, and then bring my left foot up as part of my entry, and then do whatever I will do. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of opportunities for him to fight back at me and take back the initiative. Versus, if I do this out of my left side, usually you can do it much more reliably on someone coming at you, either with a thrust or a cut. It doesn't matter. But he comes in. I've now got that solid overpressure. I'm just literally arm's reach away from hitting him, and I have a ton of fun options from the plays to use. Just kind of depends on what I feel like doing Jake here. And that's kind of the other main, that's the main thing that Posta di Donna Sinistra is really good for, is it knows the close range game very, very well. And if you can cultivate that sort of entry, you're going to have a very easy time holding on to people's swords. But otherwise, that's the main plays from Posta di Donna Sinistra. Thank you very much, Jake. Not a terribly long episode, but that's okay. It's not a terribly complicated guard. It's just really good at what it does. Either way, though, next week we will be moving on to the second page. Huzzah! And I'm really glad that you guys have been enjoying this series. Please keep showing that support. It really does help me get out of bed in the morning. And otherwise, we should go over some other techniques another time.